y'all, welcome back. So on this episode, let's do some swapping stories. So I have Jordan Berry from Caliente Therapy here again, and let's swap some stories on, I don't know, what case sticks out to you the most of all the horses that you've worked on? What's the one that pops into your mind first?
So I've worked on a lot of horses and done a lot of rehab cases under superior therapy. But the one that sticks out to me, it was my first almost solo case when I moved back home as Caliente Therapy. So there was this horse that decided to get his foot stuck in the gate on Christmas Day. Like right in the hinges, all blood supply cut off. And they had called the vet, the farrier, they had called everybody in to be like, okay, are we gonna have to put this horse down, amputate its foot, like what's going on? Because it went from perfectly fine to wounds and then the hoof capsule like sloughing off. So you could see the sensitive tissue in that foot, like you could literally see into the foot. It was really cool. I have all the pictures and I'm just like, wow. And so, you know, they kind of went through like the vet farrier trying to figure it out. And then they decided to call in reinforcements. I was the reinforcements, believe it or not. No, just kidding. But he was at the time 4. He was a 4-year-old gaited gelding, and they were just like, we don't know what else to do. So they threw a Hail Mary at me, and they were like, well, if you can get him healed, like, great. We want to be able to trail ride this horse again. And like this lady had, like, this was her baby. Besides her actual baby, like she raised him, did all the things, like everything. So when I got involved, like the hoof had already started dying, and so like the sole was already kind of in the process of dying, and I was like, we've got to reverse that. So long and the short of it, I did all of my PMF, my Whirlpool boots. I didn't get to take the TheraPlate, but I did a lot of kinesiology taping and the cold lasering, everything that I had mobily, because my facility was still being built and I didn't have the tread hooked up yet. Like I took everything mobily to this horse and was out there like 3 times a day, like 5 a.m., lunch, and then like after dinner, like 3 times a day. And I was like, all right, we're gonna get all of this good oxygenated blood flow to this hoof and we're gonna regrow it. So I ended up getting about 90 days with this horse in total. And within 90 days, like, he was back to doing corrective exercises, like, went through the whole, like, we have completely non-bearing, like, no weight on this leg, like, 3-legged horse, to, okay, we're, like, unsound, but we have weight. And, like, this foot was starting to regrow. And, like, I got to watch, like, a sole, a frog, and a hoof capsule regrow on this, like, horse after working with a vet, a farrier, and myself. Like, it was a lot. We actually took the farrier, Sydney, she took like screws and fencing wire, and we like fenced this horse's foot together because we didn't want the foot to keep expanding. We wanted to stay here and, you know, move up and down.
Now, did you have a shoe on the bottom of it with that, or it was just holding that foot together?
It was just holding the foot together. So like the foot was, you know, gaited horses have bigger feet, like plattery feet, what I would call it instead of like a quarter horse. They have these big feet, and so it just kept getting bigger and bigger, and just like everything was just crushing. And we were like, we've got to stop that. So she drilled screws. There was 4 screws in this foot, and because it was dead, the hoof capsule was dead, but it wasn't
so
dead.
It's not like drilling screws into a healthy foot where you're gonna cause damage.
Yes, like we could, like how the sole was, it was so open because like the sole had fell off, like you saw the sensitive structure in that foot, and it was like, okay, we can drill here to not hit any sensitive tissue or sensitive structure of that foot. And so she took fencing wire, and we fencing wire, screws, and electrical tape that foot. And then I put kinesiology tape up and down that leg. Like, we did the whole 9 yards to keep this foot from like falling off. I was like, no. I was like, I'm making sure this horse keeps his life and keeps this foot. I was like, I'll do whatever. And so whether that was, 3 times a day,
Mhm.
5 o'clock in the morning, I was doing it in the cold. Like, it was in March. Like, it happened on Christmas Day. And then, like, they went through January, February, called me in March. Because they were like, it was just that long of a process. And so I started March and worked through the cold mornings of March and the cold mornings of April. I worked in, like, the pouring rain with this horse. And then I think April, and then May was like in my last times with him, and he was doing corrective exercises. Like, he made a full comeback, and now he's back to riding and has a hoof
And helping us teach, because he was here at our
Yes,
last course
he
as well.
was.
So now, and that's one thing I like. I included the pictures of you teaching to our group here, where we had him standing in the background, and you were going through all of the pictures on your iPad, like the slideshow of pictures.
And a lot of those pictures are on my Facebook page. So if you're listening to this, you can go check it out to see what I'm saying, because
Absolutely.
if you have a weak stomach, probably not, but it is really, really cool to see, like, it's a living foot. Like, basically be like,
You can see the
sloughing
lamina
on-
and everything.
Yes,
underneath
and
it.
I was like, oh my gosh, like, you can see, like, all the little spindles. Like, I'm just like, this is really cool. You can see the sensitive structure. And if you're really, like, into horse feet, I'll leave with that. Like, it is something really cool, and I couldn't have done it without, like, their faith in me and, like, my farrier and then the vet that we had on board.
Yeah, you had a
like-
great team working together.
Yeah, and it was just like this happened, and it was just like progress after progress after progress, and I took pictures almost every single day that I was out there. Like, I have a whole, like, album for him on my phone, and it starts at the very beginning and it goes to the very end, and I still go out there to see the horse, or he comes here.
Yeah.
Like, I have that close relationship with the owners, and
Yeah,
I'm just
that's
like,
amazing.
I sometimes call them like, hey, we kind of need to teach with him, and they're like, okay, come get him.
Yeah. Bring
Like,
it back.
they're great owners, and they were great through the whole entire process. Like, even with being out there with me, they're like, do you just want, like, somebody to talk to? They'd come out there and talk to me. And, like, so I even got to build that, and they've referred so many people to me, and, like, they've helped me, like, even progress my business. So
Yeah, that's awesome.
that
And
has
that
been,
was
like,
a great, that's one thing I was talking about when we were training. I was like, okay, you kind of started with the Holy Grail. Like, that way, like, you started with the impossible situation, and it became possible.
Yes.
And so I'm like, wow, that's a way to kick off starting your new business.
And I was like, oh my gosh. And I was like, I'm going to do it. I was like, you're throwing a Hail Mary at me. I was like, I'm going to catch it, and we're going to run.
Yeah.
And
I mean,
so
we had a lot of stories like that, I feel like, at Superior Therapy.
we sure
Yeah,
did.
because there was a lot of times where we had to think outside the box.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I remember we had a horse that came in with a coffin bone fracture, and when that horse came in, that fracture was so bad that kind of the only thing holding everything together was we had a shoe that had clips all the way around. It had like 4 clips on the sides coming around, just keeping that foot from expanding, you know, and trying to kind of keep everything together. And like you said, we had the progression, like my progression pictures were the x-rays all the way through. And I think the biggest struggle with that horse was, as she started to feel better, her energy level increased, but we had to be so careful because one wrong step could cause that fracture to just break open again. And so, you know, it took us a while to be able to get her on the tread. It took us a while to be able, well, I don't know, we were, I think, at a 5-month point before we were really doing anything corrective outside with that horse. But that was a horse that made a full recovery. And that was one of those weird things where they didn't even know what caused the coffin bone fracture. But I think the biggest hurdle there was keeping that horse entertained in the stall, because she was one that would want to, like, hop and jump up and down as we were treading other horses, and we're like, oh, you can't come down on that foot. Like, you cannot come down and slam down on that foot. Or taking her on and off of the tread, making sure that she didn't step sideways off of the ramp, or fall off of the TheraPlate, or step half on and half off of the TheraPlate. Like, making sure you're controlling every place that foot is set down in the day-to-day of that horse.
That's like Zed. The very first horse that ever walked into this barn, he had a broken splint bone.
Mm-hmm.
And it was my best friend's horse. So, like, that's another one that actually kind of stands out here. Like, I was like, oh yeah, I've helped you heal like all kinds of fractures at your barn. And then I come here and my best friend calls me, Sydney, and she's like, Zed broke a leg. And I was like, how did he break his splint bone? Had no idea. He was out in the pasture, and like he just came up lame. And this horse has a very high pain tolerance and does not show pain. So for him to be like still trying to eat and run and play with a leg is like literally this big. And she was like, we've got to get him to the vet. Got him to the vet. Then he came here, and he was the first horse in here. And I, like, as much as I wanted to keep up with the progress, things kind of happened, and he's still here a whole year later. But we've had some x-rays to show, like, within 2 weeks, like, we saw the break 2 weeks later with just stall rest and PMF and, like, whatever we could do, like, in the stall. It was calcified in 2 weeks. And I was like, that's...
So you had a lot of knitting and a lot of healing there.
Yes, and that was just... And
I mean, it's great when you can come back and have that month picture, because for one, it helps us advertising wise, but then it also helps us from education standpoint. But sometimes that doesn't happen. Sometimes it's like, hey, the horse is getting better, and we know the horse is getting better.
And now he's turned out and living his best life again, and he doesn't show a whole lot of like unsoundness, like at all. And I was like, you know what? I was like, we might not have like the x-rays, but we have the proof.
Right.
Like with him now, like in all, like I still have pictures of him like working through it all. And I remember like when they gave us the okay to treading, that was a really, really big day for him. And it was just like, there was a lot of tears that day. And because it was like, wow, like I was able to help him heal his leg. Yeah. Like with PMF and with doing the therapy, like doing whatever I could to like heal that. And even with River, like it was like, wow, those are like my biggest cases that I talk a lot about, and those are like my
kind of the foundation.
Yeah, the foundation of
Caliente
Therapy. And then definitely, it's a quick story. Larisha, out in Oklahoma. Summer decided to let me. I was still an intern. I was not a paid staff member yet. And you said, take this horse for the first time outside of like the fence. Like we needed her on the flat ground, kind of in the sand, like the sandy area that you had.
And normally we did all of our corrective exercises in a big fenced paddock, just in the happenstance that anything goes wrong.
And I was like, oh God. I said, all right, I got it. And she was like, don't be scared. And I was like, okay, I'm not scared. And I was still timid. I have grown as a horsewoman since that day because of this horse. And she was like, okay, like we need to see her moving. I think she was like a fitness horse. I can't remember what she was in there for. But like we could still lope her on the lunge line. I said, okay. Goes out into a lope on the lunge line. And then she's fine. And then all of a sudden she's not. And she is running backwards at me. And Summer's like, you got it, Stan, you got it. And I was like, no. I was like, I don't. Like trying to kick
I'm videoing this for the client, by the way. So I have all this on video as it's happening.
And I have the video and I watch it just when I need to laugh. Because I'm just like, wow. I'm like, look how far I've come. Because now horses do that to me. I just stand there and look at them. And I'm like, what are you doing? And I'm like, are we feeling good? Are we hurting? And I'm like, what's going on? And so sometimes the horses just need to like, I guess I'm their punching bag. But since that day, I've grown as a horsewoman and been like, no, like let's not do that. Like let's check you around. Like I just took off running because I was like, what'd I do? And then I was like, no, because she got from like
I mean,
really
at least
close.
you still had the line though.
Yeah,
like you're just running line and all, so.
Yeah, but like I turned my, like it was so bad that like if she was kicking, I was like, I didn't know what to do because I was really getting scared. And I didn't want to let you down. It was more or less like a, oh God, like Summer's watching, she's videoing, like, don't mess up, Jordan. So like, I stood there for the longest I could, and then I just like, she cuts the video off when like, I turn, and I'm like, running away, and I was just like, oh God. I was like, she's gonna hate me. I was like, I'm never gonna be able to come back here again. And then And then I was like, I think at that point is when you're like, she's gonna be a paid staff member. But I was like, oh God. I was like, I'm so scared.
And then Rex. I just posted Rex's video the other day of like you taking him through. I think that was when you were there for your training.
Yes, that was literally for training. And
so yeah, so let's finish up telling Rex's story because that's a great one.
oh God.
So like this horse came in, was a mounted shooting horse, and came in and was extremely neurologic. And so we were working through an EPM rehab, and there's tons of videos of this horse on, especially on our EPM playlist, because I did a video with him. We would have to really watch like having him on the TheraPlate, because as soon as he would relax, he would start to topple off of the TheraPlate. And so you would have to kind of keep him entertained so that he didn't get to that full state of relaxation, because then I had to worry about him falling. He was really hard to stretch. He was really hard to do a lot of things with. And so, you know, we had progressed starting just on the dry tread with him, and then got into regular treading, and then got into taking him outside for corrective exercises. But one of the things with him that would set him off was he had some impairments to the vision, because the cranial nerves are inflamed whenever we have EPM. And so, you know, sometimes they see shadows, sometimes we laughingly say like, oh, they look like they're looking into another plane of existence.
They're
and
seeing
so
something we don't see.
yeah, exactly. And so you were taking him outside and doing the corrective exercises with him.
Yeah. And I was just like, I was training, and I had the idea, and I was like, okay, I got it. And I'm like, they put me on this EPM horse, and I was like, he's gonna do something silly, and he didn't do anything terrible, and I was like, okay, like, I got this. And Rex gave me a lot of confidence going over those. Like, I was like, boom, we got it.
Yeah, because he goes over one, and then in the video,
like,
then he's like, at
he's
the
like,
next one.
no thanks.
And then does this like long jump and buck.
And then it's just like, oh, I'm floating through the air like a little ballerina. And what makes it the best in that video is his tail's braided. Like, I love that, because I'm like, I always know it's Rex, because he had such a long tail, and it would just like flop. And I was like, okay. And then him just bucking and kicking, and I was just like standing there like, oh, what do I do with this? And I was just like, okay, like, let's just keep going. And then you had me narrate what I was doing as a trainee. I was like, that was my most scared thing. I wasn't even scared of the horse. Like, I was like, oh God. I was like, you're asking me to narrate this video?
And now look at you, you're teaching.
Yeah, now we're back to teaching. And
other interesting things with that horse. So there's another video that's on the page of us having a rainstorm where the sound was so, like, his head was so inflamed from the EPM that the sound of the rain, he just had a complete coming apart in the stall, and I actually at one point thought he was going to rear up and flip over. Mm-hmm. So we went in there, as soon as he kind of got calmed down, and I pulled him out into the aisle, and I was just standing there kind of doing some body work techniques. But I wish we would have started filming how he was reacting in the stall, because that would have been a great learning moment as well. Another thing with him is when you would bathe him, you could get water on the left side of his body, but when you would get water on the right side of his body, it's like he would forget what water felt like, or it had an electric feel or something to it. And he was almost impossible in the beginning to wash the right side of him, because he would just panic and want to run backwards or run wherever. And so, like, it was an amazing feat to see him overcome so many things. And in the last video that I shot with him that the owner sent back to me was, I had pieced together where you started with the Cavalettis, because I actually had a video, I think, of where you started with the Cavalettis, and then him being able to lope through the Cavalettis before we sent him home. And then I had another video that I pieced together of him spooking that very first day, and then back to him going through a mounted shooting pattern.
Now, that was a really big comeback for him.
Yes.
And like being along for that rehab, and like watching all the things unfold, like that, it always makes me tear up, because I'm just like that's such a good story.
Yeah, that was one of the ones that will probably stick with me forever.
Oh, same. I tell that story to like literally anybody. I'm like, I know I can rehab like the EPM horse. Like, I've
And-
done it.
And we learned so much with him,
We
like
did.
doing our stretches and things. I remember, you know, like I was the only one that would stretch him because I was afraid he was going to lose his balance and fall over, and I didn't want somebody else to get hurt. But I can remember having y'all come in and help brace his hip, that way that I could get the range of motion that I needed. You know, and just step by step of the process there. You know, another thing that we encountered with him was he would want to lick the mats on the floor. And of course I'm thinking like, okay, are you trying to eat manure? Are you low in something? Is it a nutrient thing? Like, what are you doing? And then talking to my vet, he was like, well, he said, when they necropsy these horses, they figure out that most of these horses that have EPM that are symptomatic, they also have swelling of the tongue. And so what we started to figure out with him is it was a texture thing. He wouldn't lick the smooth walls in the stall. He didn't lick anything on the feeder. He didn't eat shavings. It was texture. He liked to lick the rubber mats on top of the TheraPlate. He liked to lick the rubber mats on the floor. You could also hold up a rubber curry and he would lick that. And so it was more of that texture over his tongue, which was an interesting find.
And he loved that. And it's like, we didn't stop him because once we knew that he was like, to me, I feel like he was just trying to get like stimulation. It's like, there's something going on, like,
in the same way that when your mouth is numb from the dentist, you
and
can't,
you're over here going like this.
You can't help but like work your tongue back and forth. Like it's just human nature.
And it's like, oh, I'm gonna bite it and see what it does, and then you don't realize how hard you bite it. And then you like, it wakes up, comes back to life or whatever, and then you're like, oh God, why is my tongue hurting or why is my cheek hurting?
Yeah.
And it was just like, he would just do it. It was just Rex. It was just who he
was.
was.
It's just a heat response. And I mean, we did a lot of taping. We did a lot of things on his face, and you know, those were really good moments. Like, I feel like those were some great stories to share, and hopefully they inspire others. You know, like, not only is it about talking about our accomplishments and how we felt in the moment, I hope that us sharing these stories kind of gives hope to other people as well. You know, when you're in a hard situation with a horse, you're in a hard rehab, or you don't know what to do, there's always hope, and sometimes you have to think outside the box to
get things done.
Yeah, that's what we do as rehab therapists. And I always tell everybody it's 90% horsemanship, and the other 10% is the equipment that we're using or the technique that we're doing. You've got to have the horsemanship first of being able to read the horse, and you know, then the rest of it is just let's test this hypothesis and see, does this work? If not, let's try something else.
Yep. If you can't think outside the box, look under the box.
There you
or look
go.
above the box.
I love it. Thank y'all for joining in. Happy trails.